And as we go through the slideshow, I will be passing around some of my failures. I think that's one of the things that it's not learning how somebody did it so well, but where they made the mistakes too. So that's what I'll try and help you with. And after the show, you are very welcome to come and talk to me. I've got my telephone number and everything like that for anybody who would like any assistance. Is this one still on? And I'll be only too willing to help you. Okay, I started off, if we can just go to the slideshow now. I started off with a grandfather clock that I built way back in 1984, and I kept the prices of everything that I went into it. As you can see, that one cost me 400 Rand. You can't buy workings now for under 4,000 Rand, so it's rather interesting that the prices go up. That is my second one, made out in Boya and Palmarfen. And the reason why I started making clocks was, one, I wanted to make one for my son. And when I finished the first one, my wife said to me, "You've got two sons." So I had to make the second one. And just the interesting part, how do you get, sorry, I'll just put it. My apologies. And there are two pieces of wood with a piece of paper in the middle, glued together, and you turn them. And then, of course, you'll see the joints are there and there. So that I could get a strip all the way down. That was the third one, because when I finished the first two, my wife said, "But what about me?" So I combined the woods that I had used on the others. So the bottom is Kiot, the black or dark wood there is Boya, and the white or the yellow wood there is Palmarfen. Notice they happened 1 year after the other. And this took me to the end of my clock building. At that stage, I suddenly ran out of time and money and that sort of thing. And I didn't get the price on this one written down properly. But as far as I know, that was around about 700 Rand. The second one was exactly 500 Rand. So it was 400, 500, and then 700 Rand. Right, this gets me to the start of the grandfather clock that I'm now just finished. I decided to build an octagonal clock, and that was my first mistake, because trying to get those joints and to get the shape and get 135 degrees to clamp it and to hold it in place is a major problem. You'll see just now all the jigs that I had to make to get the thing to work. That is the base of the clock. It is just on 900 wide and it is 400 deep. And you'll notice at the beginning of the show, all of this wood is made out of pink beech, Yugoslavian pink beech, which is the piece of wood that you'll see now. This is the starting of making the sides for the clock, the vertical part of the clock. And there you can see a bit of my workshop. There's my pile. Before I retired, I bought just over half a cubic, 2/3 of a cubic meter of beech. And it's been lying in my workshop for about 8 years before I started on this. Sorry, it's a little bit out of focus. This was my first attempt at gluing the sides together at 135 degrees. That is the side there. We're talking about this joint down here. That is the 135. You can see all the clamps I used. And I had learned then that I had to make a jig to clamp, because with you clamping like this, you just damage the edge of the wood. So I'll just pass these around. This is the first jigs I made, and you'll see them there. There, 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 and there. For joining, I use biscuits there and there, and also along there. There are 5 biscuits in that area running length of that piece of wood there, which is just on, I think it's 1.6 long. Of course, when you clamp, and you can see all the clamps I had on there, the whole thing tends to lift. And before I finished this, I knew I had a problem. There is a great big steel weight to hold it down. I was foolish enough to make two sides like this, thinking I had the angle right. But when I came to fit them into the base, it was 2 degrees out. Now, 2 degrees might not sound like much, but 2 degrees, when you measure it over the distance there of sort of 120, 160 millimeter, is a gap of about 2 to 3 millimeters. Now, I'm hoping these clocks last for 100 years. If I put a force on there to straighten that wood, over the years, the moisture will get in and the thing will crack. So I had to scrap this one and another one because it wouldn't work. It was not accurate enough. This is now my third attempt at a side. You can see the frames or the jigs that I made, and there's a total of 14 jigs that I made, of which 2 are being passed around, and these here, which gave me my correct angle to fit in. Now, of course, that was cut exactly to the base shape and gave me where I, in fact, no matter how I tried it on the base, I didn't get accurate enough. So this one here, there is a slight, if you come and measure it, is slightly out, but it fits in perfectly into the base. There are the jigs. You can see the big one there, which is this one up there. And then I had 3 others which fitted on the inside. Because when I clamped down here, I would have the 3 jigs, all of those ones that I've passed around clamping this way to hold the whole thing together. I said my biggest problem was the jigs and getting that right. Before gluing, I lay the whole thing out, put the jigs right, got all the clamps, the clamps off. There's the jigs lying, the other one's in position, and everything laid out, because there's only about 10 minutes of open time once you start gluing. And just to put the glue down here, put all the biscuits in and clamping, I timed it, and it took me 8 minutes when I was doing, because I was working by myself, but it took me 8 minutes to do that. So if I hadn't practiced it beforehand, I don't think I could have done it properly. There is the front being glued on now. Again, using all the different jigs. Keep pushing it all back. Thank goodness I haven't had to find this. Comment here, because it's such a long joint there, I use hot water. I use the normal alkaline professional glue, and it works very well. But there's a comment somebody, Dennis, you remarked about using water to dilute it. I found that to get rid of the excess glue, I would use hot water, wipe it all off, and then another lot with a brush and got it all off. I did not have problems with penetration of the glue into the wood. But the wood was, I said, very well brushed down, brushed hard with hot water, and I got rid of all the excess glue. Now comes the easy part of fitting the back into the block itself. Just using an ordinary big sash clamp, and again, these are biscuits there. On the small ones there, which you will see on the side down there, I used the dowels, just plain 2 dowels, 8mm dowels. That was trial fitting, and there was a big sigh of relief when it fitted. You could see it just resting in there, in the base. It was just to see that it would make sure that it would fit in, and after all the jigs, it worked. Now comes the interesting part. It's difficult, if you'll see there, that piece of wood there I've marked. Because of the shape of the clock, I was coming up around it, which you'll see when the clock, I should have actually put another slide in there. And I was coming up at an angle, around and up, and it was a complex mitre joint. So when it looks like this, it looks beautiful. So when I experimented luckily first, but that didn't make, I still made more mistakes. I found that when you do this and put those two pieces together, you end up, the camera can pick that up. Can you see that gap? And no matter how you try, and on the other side, the same thing again. So I'll pass these around. I spent many hours trying to work out what I had done wrong, because it didn't seem right that you could come up and go around the corners at 135 degrees. It should meet, and I was planning to route the outside, and I couldn't get it right until I happened to look at the picture. Now this whole clock was taken. I got the idea when I was overseas, and I took a picture of a clock, which I'll pass around. That's how the clock started off, as that picture. And from there, I had to build this clock and design it and work out the measurements. Those are the pictures of the clock that I took a picture of, and then the two of the finished clock. So as I said, I had a problem with that wood. And it was only when I looked at the picture, I saw how they got around it. So let's go back. If you'll notice, it's level there, horizontal, there and there, and there and there. Instead of meeting at an angle, in other words, I was happy to get a nice slope all the way up. You can't do that because you now end up with a three-dimensional cut. And although I was using a table saw with offset and doing a two-dimensional cut, you actually need a three-dimensional cut to be able to get that angle right. So the only way I could see around it, and I saw that's how they got around it in the pictures, was where you join up there, make it straight. And then your routing and everything will be a perfect joint. So that was another one of the mistakes I made, and I had to learn from it. There you can see the top of the clock with the joints there and the horizontal that's there. And of course it was all routed beforehand. I thought at first I could perhaps put it on the clock and then route it. Then of course you can't get down enough, because your ball bearing or whatever you're running along will mark it. So I was unable to put it up and then router it. I had to router these before I assembled those parts. Any questions so far? But there is the side of the clock and the different panels there. This panel here I've inserted, I cut again with a table saw. Like that. It's just a matter of cutting, sorry, the shape. I cut that out first, and then using the table saw, I set the saw at 10 degrees and passed it through the saw so that the blade ran along and cut it there. That is the depth of the saw cut. It's rough, it's just a spare rough one I have. Okay, we go back to the computer, sorry, to change around like this. there are all the bits and pieces, the back, the side, the front, the door, etc. And the mounting for the clock face. There's the filling pieces that go on the top and the bottom. Big thing, I've not put it in the write-up, you must try and make your clock dust-proof. Because any dust getting in there, remember we're talking of a clock that you want to last for 20, 30, 100, 150 years. And if just the dust getting in will get into the mechanism and cause problems. So make sure that you build it with panels that will seal the top and the back and everything completely. So it's almost, I won't say airtight, watertight, but so it stops the dust. The glass, gentleman before me who also made a clock also mentioned about making a template for the glass. That's what I did because everything was made, and then I took cardboard and cut the templates out for all the different pieces there, the front door, and up there. That's, if I may, just, I have the glass beveled, and this is a spare one because they had to make 3 for me before they got it right. The problem is, when I first made my first clock, sorry, there's the glass there, see it? You can see the bevel quite nicely all the way around. The problem is that there is nobody left who could cut these bevels by hand. They're all done by machine. I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but that is a curve. And the same there. And when you get this done, there's only one place in Johannesburg that does this, down in Boy Street. I've got the address if you need to go there, or the local shop will also, your local glass shop will be able to do it. Get hold of it to make it. By the way, the glass for this top cost me 960 rand.
What a bargain.
I thought it was a lot of money. Yes, there's the other part there. My experiments, that's what I will do it here. It's just the experimental one for the arch, and you can see the angles. Sorry, I can pick it up and see it. Right. The back panels, the reason why I use silicone here is there's a mirror behind that and a mirror behind those sheets there. And I wanted to, if there was any problem when the glass were to break, to take away, undo it would be a bit of a problem. So those panels, the glass was put in, and the glue, used clear silicone glue to hold it in place. There it's getting towards the end. The clock you could see now with its whole pendulum, the gongs that are suspended, and the face. But I didn't have the door on at this stage. The door I'll show you a bit later on. That is the clock completed standing in the lounge. You can see the door. I turned this handle. I could not find a place where I could get a nice brass handle. All of this is done in solid brass, none of the brass plating or anything like that. So I was looking for a solid brass handle, and I just couldn't get one no matter where I tried. So I ended up turning that handle to fit on it. The height of the clock is just over 2 meters. It's 2050 millimeters high. As I said, it's 900 wide, about 400 deep. There are glass shelves there and there on both sides, naturally, to take ornaments. And there is room at the bottom also for some ornaments. Right. I think the big thing about making your own clock is you want to customize it. In other words, it must be something that is personal to you or to the person who you might want to make it for, who has asked you to make it. So, my first one, clocks I just had our family crest put on. You can see there, I put the family crest there. There's the family crest. And on the second clock, I put the family crest down at the bottom. Then the next way of customizing it, you can do anything you like on that clock. You've probably seen some of the very old clocks. They took the face of the clock and they had them painted. So whatever you want to do on the clock face, I'm just giving you some of the ideas that I've used to personalize. Right. On my clocks, the first two I made, I have the name.
Sounds like my clock.
I have my name and the date, and I put the cost in, and I'm rather glad I did put the cost in, because I would never have remembered. As I said, they were, first one was 84, it was 400 Rand, 85 it was 500 Rand, 86 it was just over 700 Rand. If it is a special occasion for a 50th wedding anniversary or something, then put the person's name on a little plaque, and I'll show you one just now. A plaque just to have mounted, and I'll show you the one right at the end, cost me 50 Rand. It's nothing, and it's well worth it. There is the first clock I made. I think I've got it slightly closer up. 1984 cost 400 Rand. It's simple. That I would not recommend using, brass screws there, but rather just stick it on. Those brass screws, when you tend to come to clean it, they catch on the cloth, etc. I'm just explaining some of the things I think I didn't do right. There is the one I've just finished. That plaque there cost me 50 Rand. And there is the family crest. I just happened to have a spare one from a signatory that I put into the number 6. So that says it all. You can see my difference in cost. Materials cost me 12,000 Rand for this clock. Right. Customizing on the glass. Now, in other words, I've suggested that you can customize with just a plaque and whatever you want on it. You can also customize by having the glass panels on the front or side of the clock etched, painted, or done whatever you like, sandblasted. There is the clock I made for my wife. It's 20 years ago. I think I have changed. Mistake I made. I did not put our names on that. Now, it's quite possible this clock will be around in 100 years' time. It might not even be in the family. It would have been a better idea if I had put the names, because what I've got is I've got a whole lot of panels on the clock. And my idea behind this was, when I have grandchildren, then to put their silhouettes on. Also, when the kids get married, their silhouette of their wives. So, in other words, it's a living clock that's going to go on. There are 12 panels on this clock down the front. Unfortunately, I can't take any more. There's 8 on the front, and there's 4 each down the side. So that's 16 people's silhouettes that can be put on the clock. Just an idea for trying something. I've also put in lights into the clock. My first mistake was I used little 40-watt globes and I put them at the very bottom of the clock, shining up. Now that's all good and well, and it works well, and it looks very efficient and pretty at night. But then you forget, and my sons took their clocks, they're both living in London, so those first 2 clocks are now in London. They decided to put some stuff in the bottom of the clock, forgot the light, switched the light on a little bit later, and their passports were all beautifully burnt. So I'm warning you, please be careful where you put the lights, the intensity or wattage of those lights, and that they cannot be, somebody can throw a cloth in there and then somebody turns the light on and it could catch fire. There is the back of the clock I've got now, and I have two 10-watt quartz lights in there. There's a little transformer there, shining down. The lights are very easy. That is the size of the light fitting. Just pass it around just in case. That's the seat thing that the clock working sit on. You can, also you can see the difference in the wood timber there. And that's the seat board there, and the lights shine down. There is the picture of one of the lights there. And while we're on this one, there you can see some cording holding the glass in place. I have tried, and I made a mistake on the first few clocks. I used wood putty. And 20 years later, that putty is coming loose. So please don't use wood putty to fix the glass into your clock. I used silicone, and I used this sash cord to hold it in place and just to cover up the glue. And that's the sash cord that you can see there. That is the effect of the lights. Unfortunately, I'm not a very good photographer. It's difficult to, you can see I had a time exposure, a bit of a blur there. And this is what it looks like at night with the lights on inside the clock. Right. Breakdown of what it costs to build a clock. The movements, clock workings, vary in price. Now I went and contacted 3 different firms. I've got their catalogs for all the workings, the prices, the hands, the dials, everything are available. So if anybody's interested, you can have a look at it. As I said, the clock workings, or movements as they're normally called, vary in price from about 3,600. That includes the dial, the pendulum, the weights, in other words, the complete workings. And if you get a very expensive one, now that one, the one that I've got there is a very expensive one. If they import 6 or more, they're 8,000 Rand each, complete. It's 12,000 Rand if they imported just one form, and they all come from Germany.
Can't you do anything yourself? Sorry.
Yes, you could. My first 2 clocks, I brought in the stuff myself from Germany because I was flying. The one I've got now with this elaborate clock workings, I got down in Cape Town way back in '97. So it's just been sitting there waiting for me to retire. Your brass fittings, glue, I've got a complete breakdown on mine. You can see exactly what it cost me. It's going to vary from 600 Rand to 1,500 Rand depending on your glass. I said my glass came to nearly 900 and something Rand there. Labor, I battled with all this funny shape, the normal square ones, the first 3 clocks I made were a pleasure. Clamping at 90 degrees is easy, but this was the one that was the problem. Some mistakes I made, in addition to those I've already told you. Don't try and work with fresh timber that you've just bought from the timber merchant. Although it might be kiln dried and they're going to claim it's completely dry, still leave it for a few months. I left mine for 3 years. But don't try and work on timber until it is acclimatized to your workshop and your environment. So I would suggest that you leave it for a few months, 3, 4, or preferably longer. The type of wood, mine was Yugoslavian pig beech, and I learned of the movement on that because all of my others were Chianti and Boya, which are South African or good hard timbers, which do not have much expansion and contraction. The beech does. And the night that Bill came around with Dennis, I went showing them the clock and we had a look. And we remember January, how wet it was, and I've got a humidity gauge, and the humidity in my lounge had been varying for the last 3 to 4 weeks between 70 and 85% in that room. And the wood had expanded. That panel I passed you around, which I'd cut with a circular saw, that had pushed and just opened up the joints over here. Since then, it's all gone back. But please,
You glue the panels in, or just have them loose?
I've fixed them in, but I've not glued it. Let's put it that way. But they're a tight fit. Unfortunately, that's the next lesson I was going to say. If you're going to put in panels, don't fit them tight. Mine are push in tight, and then just held with two brass panel pins, and that's then still the expansion is there. Of course, the other one is using, if you're going to make anything unusual shape like I did with this last one, start off with jigs straight away. Don't have to throw away 2 lots like this. Lay out your jigs as I showed you there, and do a dummy run when you're going to have to glue over a large area and at an angle. Pre-drill the holes, because the wood is so hard, it's a good idea to pre-drill your holes, because I use brass screws throughout. Another thing I've learned, don't use the ordinary steel screws, because when I went to have a look at my son's clocks, they're living in London now, there is slight rust on the top of the screws that I used in the base of the clock. So, okay, they are 20 years old, but that's, what are they going to look like in 100 years? They could end up with quite a bit of rust. Yes?
Doesn't genuine brass go black?
It will. It will tarnish quite badly, but you don't see any screws. I'm talking about inside,
with you, okay.
Underneath.
Sorry.
This is the trick I use for putting in brass screws, or any screws. Soap. A little bit of wet soap. There's some screws there. You'll probably see it. And I use a back bag just to keep the soap moist. And all you do is you take the screw, you draw it across there. It lubricates the screw, but it will not, like using oil, affect anything and mark the wood.
Tanner, would they help?
Yes, tannin will also. You can use sunlight soap. I've never tried using dishwasher or anything like that. It's too thin and I'm worried about it running down and making a mess. But you just put that on the thread of the screw and it's pre-drilled and it goes in beautifully, whether it's brass screws or any other screws which you're having trouble with. The finishing, I've battled with brushes. I was using wood op 10 and I was not happy with the finish I had after 5 coats. So I stripped it down and I did it again. There are 9 coats on mine. It should be well sealed, but I don't know. It can't be well sealed because it moved after I finished it. I use, because of the shapes that are around the bottom of the clock and where it's routed, I use steel wool to get in there, and not the normal kitchen steel wool. If you'd like to feel this, this is a quadruple zero steel wool. You could literally rub your face with it, and compared with the 1200 waterproof. And as I said earlier, I use silicone for fixing the glass. It allows a little bit of movement, and B, I don't have any run-off. It's easy to clean up. Right.
But steel wool generally makes a nice job anyway.
Yes.
It's better than sandpaper, I reckon.
This is the breakdown of the costs of the clock. First of all, it's the different movements, and I just chose 2 different ones with the different faces. different pendulums, and that gives you an idea. There are two places I know that have plans. The one is Uniclock in Alberton. The other one is Woodworking in Cape Town. Cape Town has got 5 different clock plans, including a cuckoo clock. So for those of you who are keen woodworkers, the cuckoo clocks are, you can get the plans for that. All of mine, I bought plans. There are plans here, which we can use it and have a look at how they look. The plans vary in price between 50 to 150 Rand for the grandfather clock plans. They will look something like this, and they are full-size sheets, so you can lay them out, and some of them are half-size. But the measurements are all very clear. Mine are rather old, so they're all in inches, but you can soon convert. These are the catalogs, which you can, I've got sets of them, that you can have a look through them. They've got all the dials, the clock faces, the workings, whatever you want is in. Sorry. Gents, if you're interested, there is a lot of paperwork available. I climbed on the internet and downloaded some pictures of clocks. These are, of course, ready-made clocks, so I've got a few pages of them. Price-wise, you won't buy many grandfather clocks under 20,000 Rand, a decent clock. These here vary up to 35,000 Rand. So, although a grandfather clock is going to take you a lot of time, estimate anywhere between 100 and 200 man-hours, depending on the style of clock you decide to build. In the end, I think you'll find it very, very worthwhile. Are there any questions you'd like to ask?
Well, what did you estimate the cost of that clock with the labor and material?
I worked it out. In fact, you'll see it on one of these pieces of paper I've printed out. It cost me 12,180 Rand or something like that for all the bits and pieces, but no labor, because the clock workings were 8,000 Rand. So 4,000 Rand for the timber, the glass, the screws, the hinges. I even included the cost of the wood op, etc. Sandpaper.
So you almost double that for labor.
Yes, depending. Well, I worked on 220 hours, and at 35 Rand an hour, that's 8,000 Rand. So the clock.
That's garden boys' wages.
That is cheap labor. I mean, but it's not cheap. If you were to do this for building for somebody, I wouldn't charge anything under 50 Rand an hour. I don't think it's at that rate. It's just not worth it, because I'm not taking into account the wear and tear on your saws, your planes, electricity, etc., etc. This is purely the time it takes to cut the wood, glue it, finish it, sand it.
Almost double the price of the material.
Yes. Well, no, difficult, because not many people are going to take that expensive clock workings. As I said, this was my 4th one, and I've been having. This is how I eventually managed to trace. This is what the clock that I designed it on. I don't know if it's coming out on the thing there. That is the clock that I eventually managed to find that was made by Emperor Clocks, and that is the clock that was designed around. And it was on this picture, plus that one that I passed around, that I took to myself in a clock shop, that I had to work out all my measurements. Yes, I did not make work thing there, because I can get in quite happily from the back. It is so wide. When you're talking a clock this wide, and the work was like that. So there's plenty of room at the back to get.
This looked like open
Yes, they do open, but I think that's purely ornament. Right, is there anything else? For those of you who are interested, as I said, I have a whole lot more information here, diagrams, clocks, workings. There you can see the workings that I've got in my clock. And it was this catalog I have gives you all the different types of workings that there are made by ERWA. That's just one of the clocks. There you can see all the different types of clocks or workings for grandfather clocks, for cuckoo clocks, for wall clocks, you name it. You can see all the different sorts. Are there any further questions? Yes?
Are the workings battery operated?
No.
Or genuine wind up?
No, they're wind up or cable operated. Where you, this one is cable operated. The others are all weights with the chains, and you pull up the chain and it comes down. You can get, and I have made some clocks, wall clocks, with the battery operated, which have chimes, etc., and a pendulum that swings, but the pendulum doesn't keep the time. They vary at around about 250 to 400 rand for the face, the workings, and the pendulum. And they are very nice for wall clocks, about this big.
One behind you.
Yes, that sort of thing there.
May I just say that John has let me have a lovely 4-page summary. Some facts, some figures, some costs, some clockmaker's law, L-O-R-E, not L-A-W, and this will be distributed as an addendum to the next ERWA newsletter.
Thank you.
Of course, the next CD in a couple of months' time will have this presentation and the pictures on it.
Your base plate
Clock. And here is, I think I passed it around that basically. You have to make it, put supports in with slots, because it's impossible to line that up perfectly, level-wise, and also backwards and forwards. So, yes, this is there it is there. That is for the pendulum to go through. That is where I put the light. And this area here is where the tubes hang down, or the chimes, or depending on what you're doing. This is mounted in the clock, and you put a strip of wood there and there, but mounted with grooves in it. You know what I'm trying to say? It's got a piece of wood with 2 vertical slots there, so that you can adjust it. You set it as near as damn it correct, but it must be 100% right. So you then use a spirit level here just to get it right when the clock is on a level surface. And then you can move it this way, that way, or this way. And then it's screwed on to those strips that are there. You'll see the screw marks there where it is screwed on, because it can't be loose.
No, I understand that, but what I'm trying to get out is your actual skill, your actual working that goes on inside there. It's also got the 2 bars. How did you fix that onto the wood?
It comes, this part here, the clock, I don't know if I can see it in one of these. They come, the clock workings, assume that's the clock workings like this, and they're about that thick. In the middle here, it has 2 screws that come down with a little plate, and that fits like that. And through this hole here, you get these 2 screws that go through, and a little plate that clamps it on there. So the workings are clamped from the bottom onto the seat plate. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I didn't get those plates when I bought that working.
I've got one spare set here, but I can show you what they look like, because it actually screws into the...
Yeah, I saw there was a thread in that little bar that goes
Yes.
through the working.
Now you should have had 2 screws.
I put 2 of my own screws through it, but I think it's the plate you can
There's 2 little plates, about 60 millimeters, and perhaps 6-7 millimeters wide, and they fit across there.
And your gongs, how far down below your soundboard did you put it?
It depends. On this one here, it comes on mounted, and you just adjust it because you've got to get the strikers to hit on the right place on the either the rods, which are normally used, or in my case on the tubes. The other clocks all had rods. I should have brought along to show you that. And then you just got to, you'll find with the clock you should get some instructions. It'll tell you how far down that rod from its mounting point you should strike. And it's normally in the region of around about 1.5 inches, around about 35, 40 millimeters from where it's mounted is where the little gongs should hit the rods.
Now, those directions they gave you, the folks from Alberton, they didn't give you everything like that. Because I was told, you know, your strikers, your bars,
Yes.
the tape on it.
Yes.
You've got to hit it about 5 millimeters underneath that tape.
Okay.
Because if you go further down, what happens is it shakes so much and they touch.
That's it. You've got to get that right. And it varies slightly. As I said, mine has varied from, as you said, perhaps about 10 millimeters from where it's anchored to perhaps up to 40 millimeters, depending on the design of the clock workings. Anything else? Like I say, there are some more examples and stuff here, and I'm willing to help anybody. If you would like to contact me, to have a look at my plans and or anything else, catalogs. Unfortunately, I couldn't ask the manufacturers to give out 100 plans. Sorry, yes, sir. Yes, I've used straps too, but I couldn't get the accuracy on this. That's why I had to use the jigs to hold it in place. But straps would work, yes. I actually used straps on the base. I clamped at the bottom on my jig. At the top of the base, I used a strap around there to get the force, because otherwise you can't get it correct. That's a good point. Well done. Yes, I've got some little pieces of paper with my phone number and my address and everything. Yeah, I only bought a wrong pen, but I think it's...
John, something I just want to tell the people, if they have the clock with chains, to be careful when they pull their weights up. Because sometimes I found that the chain jumps off the sprocket on top, and it's quite a job to get it back.
Yes. That is a good point. When you are winding the clock with the weights and the chain, don't just pull on the weight here. You're going to cause eventually damage, because remember you're winding about once every 8 days or once a week, every Sunday or whatever day you choose. Then it's best to give a little, lift that weight, because the weights vary between 1.5 to 3, 4 kilograms. And you've got to pull them up and balance them. But if you happen to push it up too much, it has got a sort of gnarled gear thing there at the top, which the chain fits into. And if you get it off there, it means taking off the back of the clock and climbing in and fixing it. That's one thing you must allow to be able to get into the back of the clock, the workings itself. Otherwise, something can go wrong, and you'll need to clean it after 10 or 15 years. You must be able to get it. Yes?
On cooker clocks, if the chain jumps off of that, the easiest way is to turn it upside down, because it is smaller. So you turn it upside down and then just lift it by the chain that comes back into its ratchet again.
That was with the grandfather.
Are there any other questions?
Okay, as I said, I'm available. Try and help you as much as I can. I hope you've learned from my mistakes and don't make the same mistakes. Thank you very much.
John, I would just like to thank you for this presentation. You've spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, and I know a lot of people have been waiting quite a long time to hear the talk, and you most certainly didn't disappoint. Thank you very much. And on behalf of the club, I would just like to present you with this little certificate of appreciation. You can hang it in the workshop.
Okay.